Hello, everybody.
Oh, hello.
And welcome back to another proper video. It's been a minute. But, yeah, I know it's been a bit since I've made like a good video, and this video is not going to be like a deck list or anything like that. But with Sword and Shield legal as of this Friday, this video is coming out before that, I figured, and I've done a lot of testing, I've seen a lot of people's decks, and I think to some degree I have a sense of what's probably going to be the decks you're going to see over the course of the first week or two. Obviously, things might change after OCIC. This is pre-OCIC when I'm making this, but, you know, good prediction. So, knowing all of that, I think that there are a few cards that you could consider teching into your deck. Now, I'm considering these tech cards because, you know, some decks now I think run certain cards that were considered techs that are just kind of standard in that deck. But I think all of these cards I would consider to be tech cards based on the meta. So the first set of cards I'm going to do are cards that I think could potentially find their way into any deck. There might be a couple of exceptions. Obviously, there's always exceptions to these rules. But yeah, these cards could probably be teched into most decks. And then the next are attacking tech cards. So we've got one set of tech cards that are supposed to, you know, help you and hurt your opponent. And the next is like, what attackers would you tech into your deck if you had space for one or two attackers, based on what you think you might see in your area. So without further ado, let's just jump into it. So the first card I am going to recommend as a tech card that probably every deck should have, barring a greens deck in particular. Now, this card is probably not a surprise as a tech card, but I'm putting it in there just to like emphasize that I think it's important for you to play this. And that is, let me focus this up. Oh, there we go, Fion. And this Fion has Whirlpool Suction, which when it's on your bench, you may use its ability and your opponent has to switch their active with one of their benched Pokemon. Now, the opponent gets to choose what they bring up to the front. And obviously things like Stealthy Hood or if they only have one Pokemon, this is going to do nothing. And this doesn't work if it's on your active. So things to keep in mind. But otherwise, I think this is a great card for a number of reasons. One, I think with Cinccino Mill being supposedly very popular going into this meta, and that uses a lot of Lily's Pokédolls, this is a good way to get around those Lily's Pokédolls. So if you have a deck that uses Quick Balls, which you should be able to search this out whenever you need it for at least the first few, for like 1 or 2 turns easily. And then at that point, your deck is thin. This also is a single card that hopefully stops you from milling out maybe a turn. Yeah, so I would recommend a Fion as a tech card in your deck to get around dolls. Also, if somebody in your area wants to really play Obstagoon Sableye, then you could use this and then switch it out and then take a knockout there. So Fion is my first tech card. The next tech card that I'm going to talk about is going to be one that I think has started to turn up on people's radars a little bit. I saw a couple of lists from, I think, a Limitless Brave Birds tournament that had this card, and people are like, oh, wow, I didn't think about that. So this is Wobbuffet. Let's get this up. Now, what this Wobbuffet does with its ability is as long as this is on your bench, Prism Star Pokemon, both yours and your opponent's, have no abilities and they cannot attack. So this is a great card for a number of different Pokemon that you want to prevent. Now, obviously, if you are running a deck that relies on Prism Star Pokemon and then you end up starting this, that could be very, very bad. So, you know, consider whether or not this makes sense in your deck. But if you are playing against a Pikarom, which is looking like it's going to be popular, if not the best, but popular, this obviously is a good counter to their Tapu Koko strategy. You get this on the bench early, they can't use their Tapu Koko, you slow them down for a turn. This is also good against Victini Prism Star. I think we're going to see a decent amount of Victini Prism Star in Blacephalon decks and in Ability Zard, which is going to make a comeback, I think. So And then finally, this is really good against like, things like Volcanion. I don't think you're going to see much. Shaman, you're probably not going to see much. I mean, unless somebody in your area really likes Rowlegs, Rillaboom. But Ditto Prism Star is another Pokemon that this works on. And that's something I think people don't realize all the time, is that if somebody puts a Ditto down, or they have a deck that they need a Ditto to evolve a specific Pokemon, like the Cinccino Mill into a Macargo, once this is on your bench, that Ditto has no ability, so nothing can evolve from it. That is, I think, a very critical thing to consider. So you have Ditto, you have Victini, and you have Tapu Koko Prism. It doesn't work on stadiums, but I would definitely consider tacking this into your deck if you want to have a more favorable matchup against decks that play and rely on Prism Pokemon. The last of my non-attacker tech cards is probably one that you haven't seen a lot of, but I think it makes a lot of sense given where the meta seems to be going. And that is this card. Well, let's get it. Lysander Labs. Now, it seems weird because a lot of decks are running tool cards, including probably your own, right? But the tool card that most people probably run is the Skateboard with Jirachi. And what people are doing as a tech currently, if I say that tech, it's pretty standard now, is running an Absol in your deck. You throw the Absol down, it makes your opponent's retreat cost 1 more. Now, that's fine. It's a good card. And Absol is hard to, you have to knock it out. It's tough. It doesn't just get bumped by a stadium. But I think Lysander Labs is actually a very good tech card depending on the deck you're running for a number of reasons. One, if they throw an Absol down and you can get this to stick, then their Jirachi doesn't work and any other tools don't work for them. So they are affected as well. It doesn't take up a bench space, which is nice, which Absol does, and it's kind of annoying sometimes. So another thing that I like about this card is that it turns off all other tools. So if you're playing against a deck that likes to utilize Lucky Egg, that doesn't do anything now. If you're playing against a Zacian deck and they have a Metal Frying Pan, that doesn't do anything now. If you're playing against a Pikarom and they have Big Charm, that doesn't do anything now. Stealthy Hood, even in certain decks, doesn't do anything. You get the point, right? Like, there's a lot of Pokemon tool cards that I think are very valid. Air Balloon, right? So many decks are running Pokemon tool cards. Now, those decks can certainly bump this stadium potentially, but I think having at least one Lysander Labs in your deck for critical moments in the game, in the mid to late game, makes a lot of sense. You could slow your opponent down if they don't have a stadium in hand. Yeah. So that's why my last tech card that I'm not really seeing a lot of is Lysander Labs. And if you are running a fire deck, you're going to see a lot of Zacian. They're probably going to be playing Metal Frying Pan. And this is just going to wreck them. So big recommendation there. Yeah, so those are the just general tech cards that could work in a whole variety of decks and that are not attackers necessarily. The next set we're going to talk about are the attacking Pokemon, like Pokemon that you can tech in for specific matchups. The first card that I'm going to talk about as a tech card for a specific matchup is Tapu Fini. Well, there we go. So its second attack is the one that matters, and its second attack says if your opponent has any Ultra Beast in play, this attack can be used for 1 colorless energy. This can be used in any deck. And it does 100 damage. Now, the reason this is good is if your opponent is playing a Blacephalon, or Blacephalon GX in particular, that 1 colorless attack is enough to knock it out. So if you're playing a Baby Blounce deck, this is basically a free attack that you don't have to put something in the active that is going to give up more than 1 prize. This doesn't really cost you much more than an attachment for turn. So I really do like this as just sort of a way to buy yourself a little bit better prize trade for a turn. If you're playing against Blacephalon GX, this is really good because you're going to knock their Blacephalon GX out. And, there's games that, if that Blacephalon GX is their only one and they don't have another one powered up, if you do it mid-game and you can skip the Beast Ring with this, they could be put in a really awkward spot where they maybe can't get another attack off and this thing survives a whole other turn. And also, it feels bad to have to Lost Zone 3 energy to knock out this single prizer. So I think you're going to see a decent amount of Blacephalon and Blacephalon GX decks out there. So Tapu Fini is something that you might consider depending on what people in your area are probably going to be playing. The next attacking Pokemon, and this one's a little bit weird and maybe tough to always pull off, but actually the next two would require a deck to run Aurora or Rainbow Energy, or maybe like a couple of like random energies if you run something like Energy Spinner. But yeah, these next two Pokemon are, if you're going to attack this, you got to attack a couple of other things, but it might be worth it given what the meta might look like. This one is the Ultra Beast Nihilego. Get this focused up. Yeah, there we go. So Nihilego, its first attack is the one that matters. Its first attack for 1 Psychic Energy is called Nightcap. You can use this attack only if your opponent has exactly 2 prize cards remaining. Choose one of your opponent's Pokemon's attacks and use it as this attack. Now, obviously, this is meant for one matchup, and that is Mewtwo matchup. Now, in Mewtwo, they're probably going to obviously have Mewtwo on the board. They might have Trevenant Dusknoir. They might have Gengar Mimikyu. But if you can run Aurora or Rainbow Energy, maybe if you have a Guzman Hala, or if you have Energy Spinner and can find your 1 Psychic for this, if you can build a deck, and if you think that Mewtwo is going to be popular, I think this is a good call because you would one-shot a Mewtwo. Mewtwo is not really, it's not running Jirachi GX at all anymore. And from what I see, it's not really focusing on Weakness Guard energy anymore either. The reason being is if you find that you're up against another Mewtwo player, then you can just put Trevenant Dusknoir out front, right? And that has a Darkness weakness, so boom, you're saved from weakness. Now, if they Great Catcher you, you're screwed. But the point is, there's ways to kind of get around it now in the Mewtwo Malamar deck. So without as much Weakness Guard energy running around, I think this is a really good tech option as an attacker. Now, this last attacker is a little bit more complicated to get up, I'm not gonna lie, but it's less finicky in when you can use it. That last one, Nihilego, you have to use it when your opponent has exactly 2 prizes remaining. This one is the Fairy Mimikyu. There we go, hold on. There we go, Fairy Mimikyu. Now, its second attack is the one that matters. It is a fairy and a colorless energy. I don't love that. I wish it was just 1 energy like Nihilego, but that would be kind of broken if it was. So you're going to need to run this again in a deck that runs Aurora, Rainbow, Fairy Energy, something like that, right? And you may also want to run this in a deck that has something like a counter gain maybe, but you could also just say, I'll take an extra turn. If you run a deck with Welder, you could attach Welder to this. There's a couple of ways that you could get around this. If you're running Pikarom even, I mean, you could find your Rainbow. Instead of running the unit energy metal, just run a Rainbow energy. Grab this and then do an energy switch onto this. There's a few ways you could get this running, but you just got to kind of make your deck make that work for it. But its second attack is Copycat. If your opponent's Pokemon used an attack that isn't a GX attack during their last turn, use it as this attack. Now, situational as well. Basically, you have to use this as the attack when they don't use their GX and when they're using something that does a decent amount of damage. But the reason I like this is for ADP Zacian. ADP is just a big old boy. It's kind of hard to knock out for a lot of decks. But if you can get this guy up running after it uses something like an Ultimate Ray, those decks do not play Weakness Guard energy at all. They might expect their ADP to go down, but they probably would not expect the ADP to go down to this. So you can knock it out and you can leave just 2 prizes on the board. So the Zacian, when it has to come clean something up, it's not really cleaning up for more than 2 prizes. That's really the challenge with ADP Zacian is whatever you need to use to knock out the ADP in many instances is either a 3 or 4 prize Pokemon for your opponent. This could swing that prize trade back into your favor. Yeah, so that's why I would consider a Mimikyu as an alternate attacker, as a one-of in a deck. So that's going to be it. That is all of my tech cards going into the first weekend of Sword and Shield. Who knows, honestly, like where things are going to end up. OCIC might present other things. There's other attackers you could use, but these 3 attackers were the ones that I felt most usable. And these tech cards are the ones that I felt most usable as well. That, obviously Absol, you could put that in there as a tech card, but so many people are playing it now. It's almost not a tech card. It's like saying Dedenne is a tech card. Anyways, but that's going to do it. Hopefully you found this interesting. Let me know how your first weekend goes. And if you put any of these in your decks, I'd like to know if it worked out or if you were like, why did I put that in my deck? That was trash. It happens. Tech cards it's a hit or miss, right? You might have it in a tournament where you're like, yeah, I'm so glad I had the Tapu Fini. And then you might have it like, this was useless all night. That's the nature of a tech card. But thank you again so much for watching. I'll catch you in a future video with more good stuff. Carpe awesome.